When troubleshooting issues related to 802.1x, what should you keep in mind? Well, first of all, AAA has to be enabled. And you're going to need some radius servers that can be accessible to perform the authentication that is needed for 802.1x port-based authentication. However, these radius servers have to be defined within a method list that is dedicated strictly to 802.1x. In addition to that, you're going to have to enable 802.1x globally on the switch, and then also enable it on those switch ports that are supposed to be participating in the 802.1x port-based authentication process. So there's a lot of parts here that have to be configured perfectly so that way there 802.1x port-based authentication can function. So what are some of the commands we can utilize? Well, if you want to verify whether AAA is enabled or not, you're going to use show run pipe to include AAA. And if you don't see any output in the running config related to AAA, then you don't have AAA enabled. To enable it, you type in AAA new model. But let me tell you a little story. If you already have 802.1x port-based authentication enabled and somebody disables AAA on you, you're going to have a lot of users complaining that they can't access the network. Not just one or two. It's going to be everybody. Because with AAA disabled, you are no longer going to be able to use the AAA functions or services in order to contact the radius servers that are going to be needed to perform the authentication to allow those users access to the network. To verify if the radius server has been identified or not, you can use the show radius server group command. You can look for a specific radius server. If you're not sure, you can use the all keyword. You can also browse the running config by typing in show run pipe to include radius. And what you're looking for is the radius server that is going to be the one responsible for authenticating all of your users using 802.1x port-based authentication. So we have to make sure that the radius server is accessible. So make sure you ping it to make sure that it's going to be able to respond to those authentication requests. However, just because we've created the radius server or the radius server group on the switch doesn't mean that anything's going to happen until we create a method list which is going to identify which server is going to be utilized for authentication purposes for the .1x port-based authentication process. So we're going to have to verify that this method list exists. And if it's missing or misconfigured, we're going to have to fix it. We can do that with the show run pipe to include AAA command again. And we're looking for the method list that has .1x listed. So AAA authentication .1x, and in this case, it's just the default keyword that's being utilized for the method list, and then group radius. So which radius servers are being utilized? So we want to make sure that the radius server group matches the radius servers in the group that we have configured up here. If they don't match, then we're going to have a problem with authentication. To enable .1x globally on the device, you're going to use the .1x system auth control command. So to verify that it is enabled globally, you can type in show .1x, or you can use the show run pipe to include .1x command. Without it being enabled globally, you're not going to have any authentication going on. Everybody's going to be allowed access to the network. So even though you have these radius servers set up, and even though they are defined with the AAA authentication .1x command, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Nothing's going to happen until you turn it on. Lastly, you need to specify whether it's on or off on an interface by interface basis. You go to the interfaces, and you're going to use the .1x port control auto command to do that. To verify which interfaces are enabled for .1x port-based authentication, you type in show .1x. You can interface the interface type. Or you can type in show run pipe to include .1x and find out where they are in the configuration.